this video we're talking about histograms, and before you make a histogram, it helps big time to make a frequency table. And so up here I have the steps actually to make a frequency table and then a histogram. And again, a histogram is going to be used for used when you want to group a data set with numbers into intervals. It looks very similar to a bar graph, but a bar graph is different in that a bar graph already is divided, these categories are divided up by a name or a word category, for example, different types of sports, whereas a histogram is a numerical data set, but you're giving it categories from ranges from 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 and so forth. So anyway, when you're grouping data in intervals and you want to display that data, you can use a frequency table and histogram. So the steps, kind of combine the steps for the frequency table and the histogram all into 3 steps in order to do both. So first you'll want to choose equal intervals based on the data set. Okay, this is, well, all of these steps are very important that you do them correctly. The next step is to create a frequency table with tallies and note the frequency. Okay, that's going to tell you what you're going to put on your actual histogram. And then the last step is determine the y-axis scaling and plot the data using horizontal grid lines. Okay, so I think the best thing to do is just do an example. And so here I have baseball runs per game. Now, all of this data is listed. It's not in order from least to greatest. You could make the first step, I suppose, to put it in order from least to greatest, or as we see here, it says use equal intervals to based on the data set. So we need to basically determine what our intervals are going to be. And so maybe the best way to do that is to see what is your greatest value and your least value. And so if I look at this data set, my least value is 1. It's my smallest value. And my greatest value looks like is 11. I don't see anything higher than 11. So I want to group data or make groups between 1 and 11. Now, there's a couple ways to do this incorrectly. Let's say I want to do 0 to 5 and 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. Now there's 2 mistakes here. This is very important. 0 to 5 actually represents 6 numbers, 6 values. You have the number 0 itself, that's still in there. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 values if you include 0. So that represents 6 values. Again, this is not the way to do it. I'm giving you a negative example here. 6 through 10 represents 5 values. You have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 5 values. And then 11 to 15 is also 5 values. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So when we say choose equal intervals, we can't do this because these are not equal intervals. This really represents 6 different values, and these each represent 5. Also, you'll notice I don't have 0 to 5, and then 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15, because then there's an overlap of the 5s and the 10s, right? So that's also not a good way to do it either. Now, what I could do, okay, is since that represents 6 values, I could, and I don't have anything that says a 0, I could make this 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. If I do that, then I am 5 values. You'll notice how you can check is there's 5 values between these numbers and there's 5 values between these numbers. That's one kind of way to check it. But again, this is not a very good way to represent this data because we're going to have a lot of values in 1 through 5, a lot of values in 6 through 10, and only one, there's 2 or 3 11s, but 12 through 15, since we don't have any data for that, that's a lot of empty fields, I guess, in this interval that we're not being used, and so that's not really the best way to group this. Similarly, I could say, well, how about 1 to 6, and then, let's see, 1 to 6 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I could do 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? But if you just picture that in your head, you're going to have, only 2 intervals. And so I don't know if that's the best way to do this either. In fact, I don't think it is. So what can we do? Well, as I'm going through these and showing these negative examples, keep in mind, there is not a hard and fast, this is exactly wrong, this is exactly right. There is a little bit of leeway as long as your intervals are the same, but we want to make this data useful for us. So we could pick something like 1 to 3. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 3 values. And then we could do 4, 5, 6, right? And 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12. And I think that's going to be our best bet for this situation because that's going to give us some, a few different intervals or categories that we can use, and then and it does cover all of the data and data sets. So let's make our frequency table like this. So now what we're going to do is do some tallies. Actually. We're going to count, we're going to put marks of how many, this is runs per baseball game, so how many runs did this team score in each of the baseball games. So I'm going to go through. By the way, I'm going to count the numbers last and then count the numbers down here last and make sure that they all add up. But here's a 4, so I'm going to cross that up and put 1 tally mark in the 4 to 6 category. 10, 7, 2, 9, okay, you can see what I'm doing, right? Okay, once we get to 4, we're going to strike through to make the 5, right? Okay, now, as I said, I'm going to double check this. I have 5, 6, 7, 7. I'm going to put the frequency here, 7. This is 10. That looks like another 7, and that's 4. So 14, 18. We should have 28 values up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 5, 6, 2, 7, 2, 8. Okay, so we have all of our numbers represented. Now we're going to make create a frequency table with the tallies and note the frequency. Here's the tallies. Here's the frequency. Okay? Determine the y-axis scaling and plot the data using the horizontal grid line. So now I'm going to make my histogram. And on the bottom of my histogram, I'm going to make even space. I'm going to make this 1, 2, 3. And if I want it to be really accurate, which we do, we'll use a ruler. So that's 3.5 inches, and 7, and 10.5, and 14. Okay, so this is 1 through 3, this is 4 through 6, this is 7 through 9, and this is 10 through 12. And you'll notice on a histogram, there's no spaces between these. Now, my frequency going up the y-axis, okay, by the way, this is number of runs. I'm going to label this x-axis, number of runs, okay, and then this is the frequency, right, or times. Let's see, we should say runs in a game, maybe. Or this is maybe points in the game. This is how many times we score between 1 and 3, the number of games, okay? So we have 4 to 10. So at the top of my graph, I think I want that to be a 10. The smallest number is 4, but I don't think it's necessary to make a break in the graph. So halfway between there, well, let's do it this way. Let's do, that's 10. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and do this. 20 inches is right here, so I'm going to make that 10. So this is going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, I have this evenly spaced out, and it's not all crunched down, it's not all stretched out. It proportionally looks good. I'm going to make my horizontal grid lines going across. Okay, now I'm going to note in the 1 or 3 interval, I went up to 4, so 4, 4 to 6 went to 7, 7 to 9 was at 10, and again 7. Now I can shade those lines. It's a little hard to see in this video, but you can see now that, well, I have in a lot of the games we score between 7 and 9 runs, and then the other games we scored. There's quite a few games that we scored either 4 to 6 runs or 10 to 12 runs. There was about 7 games that did that, and then there were very few games where we only had 1 to 3 runs scored. So again, we have everything labeled with numbers, the frequency. We did everything neatly. We would want to create a title for this, you know, frequency of runs during the baseball season or something like this. And then there is your frequency table and your histogram. Okay? As always, thank you for watching.